The day they called me just the maid, something inside me broke. I stood there in that cold marble hallway, my wrinkled hands trembling around the silver tray I was holding, and for the first time in years, I almost forgot who I really was. But deep down I knew the truth. A truth that could destroy everything this rich family believed about themselves. It had been 3 months since I started working for the Bennetts, a wealthy family living in a mansion just outside Houston. Everyone in the neighborhood admired them. Perfect family, perfect kids, perfect life. But behind those glittering walls I had seen things, dark things. And every night, as I cleaned their floors and washed their expensive china, I whispered to myself, "Not yet. They're not ready to know who I am." The first day I entered that house I felt small. The place was huge, white marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls covered with paintings worth more than my entire life savings. Mrs. Bennett, a tall woman with sharp eyes, looked at me from head to toe before saying coldly, "You'll take care of the kitchen, the laundry, and my husband's study. Don't touch anything that doesn't belong to you." I nodded quietly. I had no intention of touching anything, except the truth they had buried years ago. Every day I watched them. Mr. Bennett, always dressed in fine suits, spent most of his time locked in his office making phone calls about real estate deals. Their daughter Emily was studying abroad, while their son Jacob stayed home, always scrolling through his phone, barely looking at anyone. The family looked polished from the outside, but I could sense the tension behind their smiles, especially between Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. At night, when everyone slept, I would wander into the old library. It was filled with dusty photo albums and yellowed newspapers. I wasn't looking for money. I wasn't looking for valuables. I was looking for a name, a clue. And one night I found it. Hidden behind a row of books, there was a small photograph. It was a picture of me, younger, smiling, standing beside a man I once loved. My heart stopped. How did they have this? The next morning, Mrs. Bennett called me into her room. She looked furious. "Did you go into the library last night?" she demanded. My throat went dry. I shook my head. She stepped closer, her perfume sharp and cold. "If I ever find you snooping around again, you're gone. Do you understand?" I nodded quickly, but inside I was trembling, not out of fear, but out of the memories clawing their way back. That photograph, it was taken 40 years ago, long before the Bennetts became who they are. Long before they changed their name. Back when I was Margaret Blake, and the man standing beside me was Jonathan Bennett, the same man who now pretended not to know me. For weeks I kept my secret. I played my part, cleaning, cooking, pretending to be the invisible maid. But every time I saw him walking past me with that cold, perfect face, I remembered the promises he had made when we were young. He told me we'd build a life together. Instead, he left me pregnant, alone, and poor. One evening, as I was polishing the dining table, I overheard an argument. Mrs. Bennett's voice was sharp. "If she finds out, it could ruin everything," she hissed. Jonathan's voice followed, low and tense. "She doesn't know. She's just an old woman." My hands froze. She? Were they talking about me? That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the photograph I'd hidden in my apron. Maybe they thought I was weak. Maybe they thought I'd forgotten. But I hadn't. Every pain, every betrayal. It was all still inside me. And now I knew they were hiding something too. The next morning, Jacob came to the kitchen for breakfast. He looked different that day, tired, angry even. "You're the only one who listens around here," he said softly. I smiled weakly. He was young, barely 22, but his eyes carried sadness. "Is everything okay, dear?" I asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "My father isn't who he says he is." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, Mrs. Bennett walked in. Her eyes went straight to us. "Jacob, don't bother the help." She grabbed his arm and dragged him away, leaving me frozen with 1,000 questions. That night I made a decision. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I needed to know what Jacob knew. I needed to find proof, not just for me but for the truth. So when the lights went out and everyone was asleep, I crept toward Mr. Bennett's office. My hands shook as I picked the lock, something I'd learned a lifetime ago when survival was my only teacher. Inside, the room was cold. Papers were scattered across the desk. My eyes caught something. An envelope sealed with wax marked confidential. I opened it, and what I saw made my knees go weak. It was a birth certificate. But the name written there wasn't what I expected. It said, Jacob Blake Bennett. Blake. My last name. I dropped the paper, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo through the walls. My hands covered my mouth as tears filled my eyes. Jacob wasn't just their son. He was my grandson. And that's when I heard the click of a door. Someone was standing behind me. I froze, the blood draining from my face as the faint light from the desk lamp flickered across the floor. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps filled the silence. Then a voice, cold and sharp, sliced through the air. What are you doing in my office? It was Jonathan. My hands trembled as I turned around, clutching the birth certificate to my chest. He stood in the doorway, his expression hard as stone, his suit jacket hanging loose as if he'd been drinking. For a moment we just stared at each other. Two ghosts from the past trapped in the same nightmare. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly, stepping closer. I could say the same thing, I whispered. My voice shook, but I didn't care anymore. Why do you have this, Jonathan? Why is my name on your son's papers? He froze. His eyes flickered to the paper in my hands, and for a second I saw something, guilt, fear, maybe even shame, before it vanished behind that familiar cold mask. You don't understand, he muttered. Oh, I understand just fine, I said bitterly. You left me. You left us. You told me you'd come back, that we'd build a life together, but you disappeared. And now I find out you took my child, changed his name, raised him in your mansion while my voice broke. While I scrubbed floors to survive. Jonathan looked away, rubbing his temples. You think I wanted this? You think I didn't look for you? Look for me. I laughed through tears. You married someone else and built your empire while I buried our baby boy alone. He went still. Margaret, he said slowly, our baby didn't die. My heart stopped. What did you say? He stepped closer, his voice low. He didn't die. I took him. The room spun around me. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the desk. You stole him. I saved him, he snapped. You were sick, broke, homeless. You couldn't even feed yourself. I took him so he'd have a future built on lies. I screamed. My voice echoed through the mansion, and somewhere upstairs, I heard a door creak open. Jonathan's face twisted in panic. Keep your voice down, he hissed. If Grace hears. Before he could finish, a voice came from the hallway. If Grace hears what? Mrs. Bennett was standing there in her silk nightgown, her face pale but her eyes burning. She stepped into the room, her gaze darting from me to Jonathan to the birth certificate lying on the floor. What's going on here? She demanded. No one spoke. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself might shatter. Grace bent down, picked up the document, and when she read it, her face drained of color. Her lips trembled. What is this supposed to mean? Jonathan tried to speak, but I cut him off. It means your husband stole a child. My child. Her eyes widened, then slowly turned toward him. Tell me she's lying. Jonathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Grace took a step back, her breath trembling. You told me Jacob was adopted from a family friend. You said his mother died. I had to protect him, Jonathan said weakly. I didn't know what else to do. Grace's voice cracked. You lied to me for 20 years. Jacob appeared in the doorway, his hair messy, his eyes half asleep, until he saw the scene before him. Mom? Dad? What's happening? Grace looked at him, then at me. Her voice was hollow. She's saying she's your grandmother. Jacob blinked, confused. What? That can't be true. Jonathan tried to step toward him, but Jacob moved back. What is she talking about? I felt my legs shaking, tears burning in my eyes. Jacob, I whispered. Your father lied to you. You're my grandson. Your real father, my son, was taken from me when he was a baby. Jonathan told me he died. But he didn't. He raised him. He raised your father as his own. The room went silent. Only the sound of the ticking clock filled the air. Jacob's face went pale. You mean, Dad isn't even my real father? Jonathan finally spoke, his voice desperate. I raised you, Jacob. I gave you everything. Except the truth, Jacob snapped, stepping back. Grace's eyes filled with tears. How could you do this to us? she whispered. All these years. Jonathan reached out to her, but she turned away. Don't touch me. For a long moment no one moved. The air felt heavy with betrayal, the kind that couldn't be undone. I stood there, clutching my apron, my heart breaking for everyone in that room. For the boy who had no idea who he was, for the woman whose marriage was a lie, and for myself, the mother who lost everything. Finally, Grace turned to me, her voice trembling with anger. Get out, she said. Get out of my house right now. Jonathan stepped forward. Grace, please. But she glared at him. Not her. You. Jonathan's face fell. What? I want you out, she said coldly. You lied to all of us. You built our life on a stolen child. Get out. He stood there, stunned, before turning toward me. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Revenge. I met his gaze. No, I said softly. I wanted the truth. He left the room without another word. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Because as I turned to go, Jacob caught my hand. His eyes, filled with confusion and hurt, met mine. Please, he said quietly. Tell me everything. I hesitated, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure he was ready. But I nodded. Tomorrow, I whispered. Tomorrow you'll know it all. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window of my small room, staring at the stars, remembering the baby I had lost, the one Jonathan had stolen from me. But the more I thought about it, the more something didn't add up. Jonathan said he took my son. But if that were true, who was Jacob's real father? Because my son's name wasn't Blake. It was Daniel. And Daniel died 20 years ago. So how could Jacob's birth certificate still carry my name? Unless someone forged it. Unless someone wanted me to believe a lie. And that's when I realized, the real secret wasn't about Jonathan at all. It was about Grace. The thought hit me like a wave of cold water. Grace, calm, elegant, always in control, Grace, could be the one who had orchestrated everything. But why? What would she gain from forging a document that connected me to Jacob? My mind raced, trying to piece together fragments of memories. Looks she gave me, words she chose carefully. There had to be a reason. I barely slept that night. The wind outside howled against the old windows, and every creak of the mansion made me flinch. By morning, my hands ached from clutching the photo I'd found days ago. I knew I had to talk to Jacob. I owed him the truth, or at least the pieces I could still trust. When I entered the kitchen at dawn, he was already there, sitting at the counter with a cup of untouched coffee. His eyes were swollen, his expression empty. You said you'd tell me everything, he said quietly. I nodded and sat beside him. The air between us was thick with confusion and grief. Years ago, I began softly, I was in love with a man named Jonathan Blake, your father's real name before he became Bennett. We were young, foolish, and full of dreams. But before we could marry, he disappeared. I found out I was pregnant shortly after. He never came back. Months later, I was told my baby had died during birth. Jacob's eyes widened slightly. And you think that baby was my father? I thought so, I whispered. Until last night. I told him about the forged document, the mismatched names, the inconsistencies that didn't make sense. As I spoke, he rubbed his temples, trying to absorb the storm of truth that was tearing everything he knew apart. After a long silence, he finally said, if Grace forged the paper, then she must have known something. Maybe even more than my dad. I nodded slowly. That's what I'm starting to believe. Just then we heard footsteps. Grace stood in the doorway, her eyes red but fierce. You two should stop talking, she said coldly. You've caused enough damage already. Jacob stood up. Mom, is it true? Did you forge my birth certificate? Her jaw tightened. Don't be ridiculous. Then tell me why my middle name is Blake, he demanded. Grace looked away. For a second she seemed smaller, almost fragile. Then she whispered, because you were never supposed to find out. My heart pounded. Find out what? Grace turned her gaze to me, and the hatred there was unmistakable. You ruined everything once before, Margaret. I wasn't going to let you do it again. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice shaking. Grace's lip trembled as she spoke. When Jonathan met you, you were a mistake he never should have made. He told me everything about you, the affair, the pregnancy, the shame. I forgave him because I loved him. But then years later he couldn't let you go. He looked for you. He found you. I felt a lump form in my throat. He never found me, I said softly. Grace smiled bitterly. Oh, he did. And I made sure you never saw him. The room went silent. What do you mean? Jacob asked slowly. Grace's voice cracked. I intercepted his letters. Every single one. He wanted to bring you back into his life, Margaret, but I couldn't let him. I was pregnant then with Jacob. He was supposed to be our fresh start. So, I took his name off everything that connected you to us. I buried your past. And when Jonathan started looking for you again, I made him believe you died. My knees went weak. You told him I was dead? She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I had to. If he found you again, he would have left me. I couldn't lose him. Jacob's face twisted in horror. You lied to both of them. You destroyed their lives. Grace's voice turned sharp again. I saved our family. Everything we built, everything we have, it was to protect you. Protect me from the truth? Jacob shouted. You built this house on lies. Grace stepped forward, shaking. You think she's innocent? You think she's some poor old woman? She abandoned her own child. That's not true. I cried. I was told my baby had died. You made sure I never knew he lived. Grace looked at me with something darker than anger. It was guilt, twisted into resentment. You were never meant to come back here, Margaret. You should have stayed gone. For a moment, none of us spoke. The air between us felt heavy, suffocating. Grace wiped her tears and whispered, I did what I had to do. Jacob's voice was quiet but firm. No, Mom. You did what you wanted to do. Then he turned and walked away. Grace followed him, calling his name, but he didn't look back. I stood alone in that vast kitchen, my hands trembling, my chest aching with 40 years of pain. Later that evening, I packed my small suitcase. I couldn't stay in that house any longer, not after everything that had come out. But before I could leave, there was a knock at my door. It was Jonathan. His eyes were red, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. Grace told me everything, he said softly. Is it true? You never got my letters? I nodded slowly. I thought you abandoned me. He let out a broken laugh. All this time, I thought you wanted nothing to do with me. We stood there in silence, years of heartbreak hanging between us. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. A small old locket. I opened it, and inside was a photo of me holding a baby boy. My baby boy. I kept it all these years, he said. I just didn't know if you were alive. Tears streamed down my face as I held the locket to my heart. What happens now? I whispered. He sighed. Grace wants a divorce. Jacob won't talk to either of us. I don't even know where to start. I took his hand gently. Then start by telling him the truth. All of it. He deserves that much. As he turned to leave, something in his eyes changed. A flicker of warmth I hadn't seen in decades. Margaret, he said quietly, I never stopped loving you. Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed through the house. Both of us ran toward the sound. The front door was wide open, and the night air blew and cold and wild. Grace's car was gone, but on the marble floor lay a single envelope with my name on it. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter written in Grace's delicate handwriting. If you read this, it means I couldn't live with what I've done. The truth runs deeper than you think. Look in the box under the staircase. You'll find what he never told you. I looked up at Jonathan, my heart racing. What he never told me? Who does she mean? He frowned. I don't know. But deep down I had a terrible feeling. Because there was only one person who had lied more than Grace, and that was Jonathan himself. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The letter trembled in my hands as if the paper itself carried the weight of every secret we hadn't yet uncovered. The words, what he never told you, echoed in my mind over and over, each repetition colder than the last. Jonathan's face was pale, his eyes shifting nervously toward the grand staircase. Without another word, we both walked to the hallway. The silence of the mansion was eerie, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. The space under the staircase was dark, covered with years of dust and spiderwebs. Jonathan hesitated, but I knelt down first, reaching my wrinkled hand into the shadows. My fingers brushed against something solid. A small metal box, old and heavy. When I pulled it out, I noticed it was locked. Jonathan fetched a letter opener from the table and forced it open with a sharp crack. Inside, there were old documents, photographs, and a folded letter yellowed with age. I picked up the letter first. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Jonathan's, but much younger, shakier. I unfolded it and began to read aloud. If anyone ever finds this, I hope you'll understand why I did what I did. The truth is, I never took Margaret's baby. The child she carried wasn't mine. It belonged to my brother. My breath caught. I looked up at Jonathan, whose face turned ghostly white. Your brother, I whispered. He took the paper from my hand, scanning the words, his lips trembling. No, that's not possible. But it was written right there in his own handwriting. I reached for another paper inside the box. It was a hospital document dated 40 years ago, showing that I had given birth under a different name. And next to my name in the father's column was written Thomas Bennett, Jonathan's brother. The room seemed to spin. I gripped the edge of the staircase for support. Jonathan, you knew? He shook his head violently. I didn't. I swear, Margaret, I didn't know Thomas was involved with you. Tears blurred my vision. You both worked at the same construction site back then. You were inseparable. How could you not know? I thought you loved me, he shouted, the pain cracking through his voice. I did. I screamed back, the truth tearing out of me. But Thomas, he came to me after you disappeared. I was broken, Jonathan. I thought you were gone forever. He said you sent him to take care of me. And before I knew it, I was carrying a child. I didn't even realize the truth until years later, when it was too late. Jonathan staggered back, pressing a hand to his forehead. So Jacob's father wasn't even me, it was Thomas? I shook my head slowly, piecing together the puzzle. No, Jonathan. Grace said you were already married to her when Jacob was born. That means Jacob isn't my son's child either. He looked confused. Then who? I reached into the box again and found another envelope, this one sealed with wax and marked for Jacob. My heart sank. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with words that changed everything. Jacob, if you're reading this, know that you were never meant to live in a lie. Your birth was part of a secret I could never tell your father. You are not his son nor Margaret's grandson. You are the son of Thomas Bennett and a woman named Emily Carter, a nurse who died during childbirth. Jonathan and Grace adopted you to protect the family's name. The letter slipped from my hands. My whole body went numb. Jonathan sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. God, what have we done? Everything made sense now, the forged documents, the false names, the tangled lies. Grace had hidden the truth not to protect herself, but to protect Jacob from knowing he was born out of shame. And Jonathan? He had lied to himself for decades, believing the boy was his. I destroyed my life chasing a ghost, I whispered. All this time I thought I lost a child, but I lost something else entirely. My peace. Jonathan looked at me, his eyes hollow. I didn't just lose my family tonight, Margaret. I lost who I am. The weight of it all pressed down on us until it felt hard to breathe. The mansion that once gleamed with luxury now felt like a prison of our own making. Then I remembered Grace's final words. If you read this, it means I couldn't live with what I've done. My stomach turned cold. Jonathan, I said quietly, we need to find her. We rushed outside into the cold night air. Her car was still gone, and the long driveway stretched into darkness. Jonathan grabbed his keys and we sped off down the road, our hearts pounding. The wind whipped against the windshield as the rain began to pour. After nearly an hour of driving, we saw flashing red lights ahead. My heart stopped. A police car, an ambulance, and a small crowd gathered near the edge of a bridge. Jonathan slammed the brakes, and before the car even stopped, he jumped out and ran toward the officers. I followed, my knees shaking, my heart in my throat. One of the policemen stopped us. Are you family? Jonathan's voice broke. Yes, my wife. The officer sighed heavily. We found her car at the edge of the bridge. The door was open, but she's gone. We're still searching the river. I gasped, covering my mouth with trembling hands. The world blurred around me. Jonathan fell to his knees, sobbing. Grace, no. The officer handed him something. A small water-stained notebook. This was on the passenger seat, he said softly. Jonathan opened it. Inside were letters, one for me, one for him, and one for Jacob. Mine was short. Just 6 words written in shaky ink. Forgive me. You were never the enemy. I couldn't stop the tears. Grace, the woman who had hated me for decades, wasn't a monster after all. She was just broken like the rest of us. Days passed in a blur after that. The police never found her body. Jonathan left the mansion and moved into a small apartment downtown. Jacob, after learning the full truth, left the country, saying he needed time to find himself. I couldn't blame him. As for me, I stayed behind for a while, taking care of the empty house until the Bennett's lawyers decided what to do with it. Every night I sat by the window in my old room, the maid's room, and thought about how life had come full circle. I had entered this house as a nobody, searching for truth. But what I found was far heavier than I ever imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Jacob. Grandma Margaret, it began. I don't know who I am anymore, but I do know one thing. You're the only real family I've ever had. Thank you for fighting for the truth even when it hurt. Maybe one day I'll come home. Until then, please remember me. I folded the letter gently, my eyes misty but calm. For the first time in decades, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had destroyed everything, yes, but it had also set us free. I looked around the empty mansion one last time, then whispered to the silence. You were right, Grace. None of us were the enemy. We were all just lost. And as I closed the heavy front door behind me, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the start of something new. A life built not on lies but on truth, no matter how painful it was. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just break you, it rebuilds you.